All right, good evening, everybody. Hopefully, everybody had a great holiday weekend. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen, to the right of the video if you're on a larger screen. All right. All right, so it looks like we got a couple questions in there. So we'll start here with John K. Says, can you show me where the hips should be and where the shoulders should be at impact? I think that I'm out of sync at this point in my swing. Thanks. Um, yeah, so typically, there isn't one place where they should be necessarily, but when you look at like kind of the average of a lot of the best players like pros and stuff like that, typically what you're going to see is the hips are going to be somewhere in the range of 40 to 45 degrees open, right? So the hips are going to be somewhere in this range, 40 to 45 degrees open, and then the shoulders are going to be somewhere between square and about 10 degrees open. That's typically what you're going to see. If you look at every single pro player, typically what you're going to see is the hips are going to be on average around 40, 45 degrees open. And then the shoulders are going to be somewhere between square and slightly open, like 10 degrees. That's typically what you're going to see. Now, what I will say is I think too many people obsess on getting the body to open up, and they don't think about the things that they have to do with how the club is working and things like that to get the body to open up. Because I think a lot of people are just focusing on getting the hips to open up. And a lot of times what's happening is it's not that you're not trying to get the body to open up. It's that if you were to actually open up your body, you probably hit the club terribly, right? So typically when I see people struggling with getting the body to open up, it's because they're reacting to the club face and the pitch of the club, right? So, for example, let's talk about the club face. If I have this club face very open as I'm coming down, right? Well, if I were to really rotate, let's say I had the club face wide open coming down here, and if I were to really rotate, get my hands in front of impact, the club face would just stay wide open. So what people will do is they'll get here, they'll stall their hips, so that way they can flip their hands to square up the face. So flipping the hands, early releasing the club, that is a mechanism to close the club face. So if the face is open, we may use that to square up the face. That's what I see a lot of people do. So if you're coming down and you're seeing this club face is kind of pointing up to the sky a little bit at this point in the swing, and you're struggling to get your hips to open up, it's not going to benefit you to get your hips to open because you're just going to hit way worse shots. You need to get this club face more square, so that way you're actually benefited to have your hands in front, and that's going to allow you to release the club out more out front and to get the hips to open up. So that's one thing I would look at. The other thing I would look at is the pitch of the shaft. So what I mean is coming down steep or shallow. In order to come down shallow, we need to be, or in order to get the body to open up, we have to be coming down shallow. Otherwise, we don't really have any benefit of getting the body to open up. If I'm coming down steep and then I rotate my body, I'm just going to come down even steeper. So I need to shallow the club out to be able to swing that club from the inside and be able to hit a functional shot. So I would make sure that you are shallowing out the club to be able to get the hips to open up. So those would be kind of the two major things that I would be working on if you're struggling to get the body to open up. Now, if you're doing all those things and you're still not opening up the body the way that you want to and getting the shaft length, then it'd be looking at focusing on, okay, I'm focusing on getting my body to rotate and things like that. But that's just not typically what I see when I'm working with students. Typically what I'm seeing is people are reacting to this club, and people are reacting to how this club, or reacting to the squareness of the face or lack of squareness of the face. And then they're also reacting to the club being steep. So they're stalling their body. If I look here, if I'm coming down steep and then I thrust my hips forward, well, look, I can shallow it out, right? If I go like that, that shallows out the club. And if I go like that, my body won't rotate. So you're more than likely what you're doing is you're not opening up your hips in an effort to hit a functional golf shot, because that's just the pattern that you have right now. And if you want to change that, you most likely need to change the club face and to change the pitch of the club. The way I'd recommend doing that is working through our 20-minute shallowing fix course It's a great course to help you to get the club face more closed, so that way you're incentivized to get the hands in front, and also incentivized to swing the club from the inside, which incentivizes you to open up the body. All right, keep the questions coming here. So Bob D says, when you are working a ball to a fade or a draw, do you just adjust the club face or do you adjust the swing path? Well, you can really do both, really. So basically what produces a draw is a face being closed to the path, and what produces a fade is the face being open to the path. So really, you're technically adjusting both, right? So to hit a straight shot, I'd want my face and my path to be in line with the target, right? So you can think of this, let's think of it this way. Let's say that this PVC pipe is, let's say that this outlet is the target. This PVC pipe, we'll say that that is the club path, and we'll say that this alignment stick is the club face, right? So if I'm trying to hit it straight, I want my face, the orange alignment stick here, and my path to be in the same direction, right? Now, if I'm wanting to hit a fade, then I need to adjust both, right? If I'm wanting to hit it on the target, that is, right? So I need to get if I'm trying to hit a fade, I need my path to be to the left, and I need my face to also be to the left. Because if I want the ball to start to the left, I need my face to be close to my path. Close to my target. But if I want it to fade, I need it to be open to my path. So basically, you're going to have it about halfway in between, right? So this is the target, this is my path, and then this is my face, right? I need to have, so if you want to put that in terms of degrees, you can say, okay, let's say that my path is 6 degrees out to in to the left. And if I want to hit a fade, then I need my face to be about 3 degrees closed. That makes it 3 degrees close to my target, but 3 degrees open to my path. That will allow the ball to fade back toward the target. Now, if I want to hit a draw, then I need to do the other side. Let's say I want to hit a draw. I need my path to be into out. I need it to be right of the target. And then I need my face to be half that much, right? I need it to be open to my target, but close to my path to get it to draw back. So if you want to think of that in terms of degrees, your face needs to be half of the path. So let's say that my path was 8 degrees into out. If I wanted to hit a draw from that path, I need my face to be 4 degrees open to the target, which would make it 4 degrees open to the target. That allows the ball to start to the right in order to draw back. And I need it to be close to my path, 4 degrees close to my path to get it to draw back. So there's lots of ways to do it. You can set up to where your feet are dead aligned with the target, and you can change the face and the path with your hands. You can do it that way. The way that I like to do it is I like to basically shallow the club on every swing. I like to have this club working down the same way on every swing, but I changed the face either with my hands or with my grip. I can square it. I can close the face by bowing the wrist, or I can keep the face open by basically kind of holding the face off. That's the way that I do it, right? So if I want to hit a draw, what I'll do is I'll align my body. If I want to hit a draw, I'll align my body to the right. So I'm going to make the same swing coming down as far as the path of the club. But since I align my body to the right, that gets my path going out to the right. And then I'm just going to get the face more closed. I'm going to get the face more closed by either strengthening my grip or turning down this handle more as I'm coming down. So I'm going to feel that face more closed as I'm coming through by turning down that handle. Now, if I'm hitting a fade, what I'm going to do is I'm going to align my body to the left. I'm still going to bring this club shallow relative to my body. But I'm going to open my body up so that way my path is actually going to go left relative to the target. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold off the face. So I'm going to take a little weaker grip, and I'm going to hold off that face. So I'm not going to turn my hands over or roll the face over. I'm going to hold that face all the way through. I'm going to feel like I'm holding it open all the way through to get it to curve back. That's the way that I do it. There's lots of ways to do it, though, right? whatever way is the best for you. Some people do it entirely with their arms and the hands. Some people, will early release the club to close the club face. Some people will get more shaft lean to open up the club face. There's lots of ways to do it, but I think that the way that I just described it is the easiest way to do it. So Chris J says, can you do a reminder of best way to do stick drill to get hands ahead at impact and hips open? Yeah, so if you're not familiar with what the stick drill is, it's a drill where you use an alignment stick and hold it up against the shaft like this, take about half of it like that. And what you would do is I would start out with shorter and slower swings, right? That's essentially what I would do. So basically kind of waist level to waist level swings is what I would start with. And the reason, what's the point of the stick drill? Well, the point of the stick drill is to help you to get shaft lean, help you get the hands in front. And what the stick does is it gives you feedback on whether you're getting your hands in front or not. So typically what I see people do when they early release the club is they release the club with their hands, their wrists, or they throw the arms in front of the body too early, right? So the stick will give me feedback if I'm doing that. If I flip my hands, it's going to whack me in the side. If I throw my arms in front of my body too quickly, it's going to hit me in the side. So if I rotate my body and get my hands in front, then you can see there how the stick doesn't touch me, right? And I would start out with little chip shots doing that. And basically what you need to feel like is that when you bring the club here, the only thing that's bringing the club to the ball is the rotation of your body. Because if you throw with your hands and throw your arms in front, if you go like that, then the stick's going to touch you. But if you bring it here, right, your lead arm is going to go across your chest a little bit. Your trail arm is going to bend, right? We kind of want to keep that relationship and then basically feel like the club is swinging along the side of your body, right? So if you're someone who's early releasing, you're used to throwing the club in front of your body, right? Throwing the hands and throwing the arms in front of your body and then throwing the club head in front of your hands. You're used to doing it that way, right? You're used to the ball being in front of you, then you throw the arms in front. Well, with this, you can't do that because you'll hit yourself in the side. So you have to turn your body and rotate the body in order to do that. And odds are, if you take this and you try to do a full swing with it, you're going to have a really hard time with it because your body just doesn't know how to move that way yet. So we have to start out, break it down, go slow, start out with shorter, slower swings, chip style swings, and then build your way up. Once you get good at that, then you get to where, and if you're doing it correctly. So what I would make sure you can kind of cheat this drill by just pushing your hands in front, right? So if I were to just go like this, right, I can get my hands in front and have that stick not touching me, but look at my body, right? I can basically keep my body still and push my hands in front. That's not, you want to make sure that you're not doing that because you won't be able to scale that up to longer swings. So I just make sure in your shorter swings that you're here and you're letting the body open up. You're letting the chest open up. You're letting everything kind of open up. And then you can bring it up to here and do the same thing. Let the body kind of open up as you're coming down. There's lots of demonstrations and videos on the stick drill as well on the website. Let's keep going. So Reg N says, I can't seem to shallow the driver using you methods. Could you go over your shallowing method with the driver? Well, the shallowing method with the driver, it's no different than any other club, to be honest. The thing that's different about the driver is that you actually have to shallow out the club more because of the ball position. So when the ball position is more forward, so if you think about it this way, our club works down, right? And then it works down into the right, then up into the left for a right-handed golfer, right? So for a for a normal shot that we're hitting off the ground, the ball position is going to be somewhere close to the middle of the stance, right? So that means that I can have my swing direction kind of in like this, Right, when I'm coming down, I'm making contact with the ball here, and then it works back up. But with the driver, the ball position's here, right? So my club is starting to work to the left by the time I get to the ball if I don't change my swing direction. So I actually need to shallow out the club more with my driver because the ball position is more forward. So naturally, it is going to be harder to shallow out the club with the driver for that reason. So we just need to exaggerate all the things that we did to shallow out the club, right? So the way that we want to shallow out the club is with the upper body. That's what we want to shallow out the club with. The lower body you want to use to rotate your body. All right, so let's go over that. I tend to go over this in every office hour, so I apologize if this is redundant, but typically shallowing comes up, and it's important to understand the things that shallow out the club. So there's lots of ways to shallow out the club, and what a lot of people do is they shallow out the club with the lower body, and a lot of the reasons is because it feels very powerful, right? So a couple of ways that you can shallow out the club with the lower body. So one would be with a big hip bump, right? So if I go like that, you can see how that changes the angle of my upper body, which makes the club shallow out. So if I have it like this, and then I bump my hip forward, you can see how that shallows out the club. That generally doesn't feel super powerful for people, but that does tend to be something that I see shallowing out the club. The thing that feels powerful to people is the hip extension, the early hip extension. So basically going like this with my hips, right? So if I'm at the top of the swing and then I go like that with my hips, you can see how that shallows out the club. The problem is that is going to make you early release the club because your body has to stall out. When your hips move forward too soon in the swing, you can't really rotate very well because essentially what you're going to do is your swing is going to look like this, right? And you're going to early release the club. You're going to have trouble controlling the face and all those things. The big reason why a lot of people do this is because it feels very powerful. If I can throw my arms away from my body and then push my chest away from the golf ball, that feels very powerful to do, which is why you see a lot of people doing it. So what we want to do is we want to, in the start of the downswing, we want to flex our knees. We want to flex our hips. So what that means is this is knee flexion. This is knee extension. This is hip flexion. This is hip extension, right? So we want to flex that in the start of the downswing because that initiates the rotation in the start of the downswing. And then from there is when we want to extend up and through, right? We want to extend through contact, not at the very beginning. We don't want to use extension to rotate the body at the very beginning of the swing. We want to use the flex in the knees and the hips to initiate that rotation as we're starting down, right? So that shallows out the club, or that is something that can shallow out the club in the sense that it brings your hands out here, which applies a force that makes this club kind of lay down. But just because you can overcome that. I hear a lot of instructors say rotation shallows out the club. It does in the sense that if I rotate my body, my hands will go that way. And this club, if it's in a position to do so. So basically, if I have the club like this and I rotate, that's not shallowing, right? That's going to actually steepen the club. But if the club is like this and my hand goes out that way, because the club head wants to line up with the direction my hands are moving, right? If my hands move in this direction, right, the club head's going to want to line up with that. It's like a water skier, right? The water skier is going to want to line up with the direction the boat is going. That's why when a water skier is turning, right, you can really fling a water skier over the wake. Kind of the same thing here. I can really get that club shallowing out if the club is here, and then I move my hands in that direction. Now the rotation can do that, but you can definitely. But what I see all the time is people rotate their body, but then their arm is in a position, their wrist, they rotate their body, but they go like this, right? So just because you're rotating your body doesn't mean that you're going to shallow out the club. In fact, a lot of times it means that you're going to steepen the club. Rotating in and of itself is a steepening mechanism, but it also, because of the forces, can help you to shallow out the club. But I don't want people to think that it actually does shallow out the club. I think that's misinformation. because for most people who try to do that, it actually ends up steepening the club. All right, so again, we want to rotate with the lower body. We want to shallow with the upper body. So let's start with the wrists. What shallows out the club with the wrists is flexion in the lead wrist, extension of the trail wrist. So if we go like that, right, that shallows out the club, right? What it also does is it can close the club face. So that's why you see a lot of tour players doing this. It kind of kills two birds with one stone. It gets the club shallow and it closes the club face. It can help you to do both. In the 20-minute shallowing fix, we encourage you to kind of play around with this. Generally, it's easier to get the club face closed with a strong grip and then have neutral wrist angles, because that's a lot easier for most people to do. It's very difficult for a lot of people to flex that lead wrist and extend back that trail wrist, because this feels very weak for a lot of people with that trail wrist. It's a very weak feeling position, and it's hard for a lot of people to do. So generally, a more neutral position with the wrist with a stronger grip is easier for people to do. And then shallowing in other ways is generally easier. So let's go over the rest of them. So flexion, extension, flexion lead wrist, extension trail wrist. Flexion is bowing, extension is basically cupping. So this kind of motion. All right. Now with our forearms here, we can rotate the forearms. You may have heard us talk about turning a doorknob to the right. So if I have my elbows to my side here, I lock them in, I can rotate my forearms. That shallows out the club, right? So that's that turning a doorknob to the right feeling for a right-handed golfer. And then as we work up, we can work to the shoulder joints. That is going to be external rotation of the trail shoulder, internal rotation of the lead shoulder. You can think of this as losing an arm wrestling contest, winning an arm wrestling contest. If I drive my elbows, right, if I'm coming down and I get my elbows going out toward the golf ball, that's going to accomplish those things. This is something that Clay talks about in the 20-minute shallowing fix is, chopping, right? That's that chopping feeling, driving the elbows toward the thing that you're hitting, right? Drive the elbows toward the golf ball. You can see how that shallows out the club. All right. And then the last piece is with some side bend in your spine. Right. So you think of our spine, you can think of it being straight up and down here. If I keep my hips square or keep my hips level and then curve my spine to get my shoulder kind of going, my right shoulder going down, that is right side bend. And that can shallow out the club. So if I go up to the top and I go into right side bend, you can see how that shallows out the club. So I'm here at the top, right side bend, that shallows out the club. So those are the things you want to shallow out the club with the upper body, rotate with the lower body. Rotation with the lower body typically steepens the shaft, but because of the forces that are being applied on the hands, it can help to facilitate those motions that I talked about. It can help encourage arm rotation because the club, the force of the club can encourage that. It can help encourage the flexion and extension of the trail wrist. It can help encourage those things. Doesn't mean that they're automatically going to happen. I can rotate my body and then go like this, right? It just means that if you're kind of letting the club, the momentum of the club go, it can help to shallow out the club, but not a lot of people are able to do that. But basically, in some of those things, what you have to do is you have to look at what you're doing in your swing, and then try to add, because it's not all of those things that you need to do. That's the other thing I want to mention is that if most people, if they maxed out all of those things, right? So they maxed out the amount of forearm rotation, the amount of flexion extension, the amount of shoulder, external internal rotation, the amount of right side bend. If I were to do all of those things, right, that club is too shallow now, right? So that now the club is way down here. I could shallow out the club that much if I want to, but that's too much, right? So it's just not everyone's going to do the exact same thing. Some people are going to have a little bit more forearm rotation. Some people are going to have a little bit more external rotation of the shoulders. Some people are going to have a little bit more flexion extension of the wrist. Some people are going to have a little bit more right side bend, and a little bit less of other things. So it really just depends on, what your makeup is, what you do the best. Now, some people, if they're really limited on flexibility, may have to come close to maxing all of these things out to get the club shallowed out. but not everyone's going to be. Most people aren't going to be in that situation. Most people, I am very unflexible, and if I max out every piece, right, that gets the club here. All right, let me actually. I'm kind of cheating a little bit because I'm not gripping the club totally. So let me take a good grip on the club, and then there. So I have a good grip on the club here, and I'm maxing out everything, right? And then it has to match up with your rotation as well, because if you don't have enough, the more you shallow out the club, the more you need to rotate to kind of neutralize how much where this club's coming down. If I were to kind of maximize everything, right, and then no rotation, well, look, this club's working too much from the inside. If I maximize everything, I better be rotating a ton to get that to work out. All right, let's keep going. So Bob B says, thanks. That's how I feel it's best for me. I feel I want to keep the swing the same and just adjust the club face. Yeah, I think that's the easiest way. Thanks, Bob. So Peter B says, thank you for your vault video G193 right shoulder movement explanation. This has helped me improve consistency of contact. Awesome. Glad to hear it, Peter. Glad to help. So Gary P says, I was club fitted for my driver. I was told I needed a shaft 2.5 inches shorter than standard length. I've since added an inch to length. I feel I is sacrificing distance. My accuracy isn't affected by adding 1 inch. Should I consider getting back to standard length? Well, here's the thing, Gary. Whenever you're fitted for clubs, I would ask why. Why did they cut 2.5 inches off the club? If you don't know why, or you don't agree, or whatever it is, you got to ask why. I don't have any context as to why they cut 2.5 inches off the club. So I don't really have a way to answer your question in a good way, because I just don't know all the things that happen. What I would say, typically, if you're cutting, now I'm not, the other thing I want to mention is I am not an expert club fitter. I don't know all the ins and outs of club fitting. I know some about it, but my job is not to fit people for clubs. My job is instruction, right? Now there's definitely some overlap there, but I'm not an expert in fitting clubs. I don't know what all the shafts are. I don't know the need to, all the different things that could be necessary to shorten or lengthen clubs. But my general understanding as to why you would shorten a club would be to help you to hit the ball more in the center of the face, right? So, but it also comes with negatives, right? Now, sometimes shortening the club can reduce your club head speed. It doesn't always, but it can reduce your club head speed. So you have to find the happy medium for you. It sounds, 2.5 inches, that's a lot to cut off of a club. So I'm not really sure why they would do that, but I would just ask, if you're going to get fitted, this is just kind of a good lesson for everybody. Ask questions. You have to ask them why they're doing things. You need to understand why it is they're doing what they're doing. Because the whole point of a club fitting is to help you to get the clubs that are fitted for you. And it sounds like you don't believe that the club is fitted correctly for you. So I think you need to go to whoever fitted the clubs and tell them, like, hey, you cut 2.5 inches off my driver. It's not helping me with this or that or whatever. What was the point of that? Whatever it is, that's what I'd ask. I don't know the reason for that. What I would say is, use the length of driver that you can control and hit the farthest. That's really what it comes down to. I don't know if going to standard length is going to do that. Typically, the longer the club is, the harder it is to control. But the faster you swing it. Now, obviously, there's a point in diminishing returns. There's a point to where the club gets so long that you don't swing it faster, right? So you just have to find what works best for you. Typically, if you get a good fitting, they're going to put you in the length, weight, everything, stiffness, everything, head of driver that's going to allow you to swing the fastest and have the most control with that speed. So that's what a good fitting should do. So I apologize. It sucks. You may not have gotten a very good fitting from what it sounds like. So I would I'd be asking them, like, hey, why'd you take 2.5 inches off my driver? It's not really doing anything. So Bob B says, does the extra shallowing of the driver also apply to longer irons in fairway woods? It can if the ball position, if you're putting the ball position very far forward. So that kind of leads me to another thing that I see a lot of people doing is pushing the ball position too far forward with long irons in fairway woods. I'm a proponent of having the ball position be relatively the same for all shots that are off the ground for most golfers, because a lot of people, I don't know what it is, but they get along the longer club in their hands and they just want to push that ball position forward. The most important thing when you are hitting shots directly off the ground, the most important thing, first and foremost, is to be able to make ball first contact. The farther you put the ball forward in your stance, the harder it is to do that. Now, if you're trying to hit the ball high and you have a lie where the ball is sitting up, and you can kind of get under it a little bit, then heck yeah, tee it forward, or not tee it forward, but play it more forward because that's the shot that you're trying to hit. But for any standard shot, what I would recommend doing is playing the ball position relatively the same. So for me, what I do ball position wise, I basically kind of have just 4 ball positions for the most part. For the driver, it's off the lead shoulder, right? I'm playing that ball forward. And for that reason, I need to shallow out the club more because the club's going to tend to want to work more to the left by the time that it gets to the golf ball. For a fairway wood, or my standard ball position for most of my clubs off the ground, be kind of straight down from the lead ear. So this is just barely forward to the middle of the stance. I might move like my hybrid in fairway wood, a ball forward of that. That's a good amount to still allow you to make good ball first contact. If you're struggling to make ball first contact with those clubs, I wouldn't move it though. I would play it in the same, I would play it off that lead ear. A lot of people struggle getting their fairway woods up in the air. It's not because there's not enough loft there. It's because they're hitting it thin, or they're hitting the ground before the golf ball, right? Or they're getting the club face too closed because they're playing the ball too far forward and the face is getting too close and they're smothering it, right? Get the ball in a place to where you can make ball first contact. You can swing from the inside and also get it higher on the club face. You'll be surprised at how high you can hit it when you play the ball in the right position. I actually had a student that came in for the distance clinic, and at the end of the distance clinics, a lot of times we'll just kind of have like a freestyle where we can talk. We don't have to talk about distance. We can talk about anything. And this golfer was having issues getting the 3-wood up in the air. Well, they were playing it far forward in the stance. They were coming over the top, smothering it and hitting it to the left. We moved the ball position back to like where they play their 7-iron, right? I had them show me where they play their 7-iron. I put the ball in the same position as their 7-iron and told them to hit the 3-wood from that position. All of a sudden, ball got up in the air nicely and went dead straight, right? So I'm kind of riffing on something that I commonly see. But generally, if you're putting the ball slightly forward, it's going to be slightly more shallowing that needs to happen, but not much more. But if you're playing it in the same spot, it's going to be the same. All right, so BJ says, I have gone through the top speed golf distance fix in shallowing courses. When I watch myself on video, I notice my left arm is bent at contact with the ball. Do you have any drills you can recommend to help me to get that left arm straightened out when striking the ball? So what I would say is, first, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Bent lead arm is not necessarily a swing fault. It depends on why the left arm is getting bent. So there's lots of high elite players that have a bent lead arm at contact. Lee Westwood, Anil Cabrera, Jordan Spieth, Brooks Koepka. There's lots of players. So the reason why they're bending their arm is because it helps them to pull the handle up a little bit more, right? So if you think about it this way, if I'm holding the club like this, and then I just have this fixed position, I just let it swing down, it's going to have a certain amount of speed right here, right? But now if I have this fixed position, but then I let it go and pull up on it at the same time, it's going to have more speed at the bottom, right? If I go like this and pull up, it's going to have more speed at the bottom. So that's essentially what they're doing, is they're coming in and they're pulling up on this club to get just a little bit more speed and get it a little bit more shallow as they're coming into the ball. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Now let's talk about the bad position where we're bending the lead arm. If we're bending the lead arm and we have an early release and there's no rotation of the body to go along with that, then that's the one that you don't want to have, because that is from the body stalling and then the arm's got to keep going, right? If our lead shoulder is continuing to move forward and we're kind of pulling up on it and the arm is bending a little bit as we're coming through like that, then that's good. But if our lead shoulder is getting here, it's staying put because we're not rotating. And then the momentum of the arms kind of fly in front of the body. So from down the line, it would kind of look like this, right? If that's what's happening, then that's an issue. That's typically going to lead to poor shots, right? So if that's the case, then I would work on the reason why your body is stalling, right? It's hard to say without seeing your swing. You mentioned you worked through the 20-minute shallowing fix, but I would just make sure that you're actually doing that, right? So, I'm not saying this is you, BJ, but I get a lot of people tell me I've worked through the top speed golf system or I've worked through the shallowing fix. But you look at your swing and there doesn't look like it, right? If you work through the top speed golf, not saying that this is you, like I said, then you should be hitting all the things. It's one thing to work through something, but to actually do it is another thing. So I would first make sure that you're actually doing the 20-minute shallowing fix. You're getting the club face square. You're getting the club to work from the inside, because that would usually, when people stall their body, it's in a reaction to get the club face, to get the club to work down where they need to, right? Because if I was coming down steep and to keep my body going, I'm going to come down even steeper if I rotate. So if I come down steep and then I stall my body and break down my lead arm, then that allows me to hit a functional shot, right? If my face is open and I stall my body and flip my hands like this, then that allows me to square up the face, right? So odds are if you have the bad chicken wing variety, you're stalling your body in order to try to hit a functional shot. So I would see where the breakdown is in the swing. Is the face open? Is it are you not shallowing out the club? That's what I would be looking at. It's hard for me to know without seeing your swing. I wish I could just give you a drill that's going to fix your chicken wing, but you have to look at first you have to determine, do I have the good chicken wing or a bad chicken wing? And then the second thing you have to determine, if you have the good chicken wing, don't worry about it. If you have the bad chicken wing, then you have to look at what's causing the stall of your body, right? Because that's really what's going on. What's the root cause of the stall of your body? And it could be a lot of things. So the shallowing fix covers those. I know you mentioned that you worked through that, but you may need more practice with it. It's hard to say without seeing your swing, but that's what I would look at. If you did the shallowing course and you're actually shallowing out the club and everything looks great, odds are you probably have the good shallowing or the good chicken wing, and I wouldn't worry about it. So Reg N says, most of my shots are toe hits unless I focus on hitting the ball with the heel. It seems to work, but should I attempt to fix the toe hits another way? Again, there's no way for me to know the reason why you're hitting it off the toe without seeing your swing, but you're going about it without me knowing anything. That's what I recommend doing. That may be what you need to do. You may just be need to be calibrated. You may just be a little bit off, right? So if that's the case, try to hit the ball off the heel and keep doing it until you actually start hitting it off the heel. And then at that point, you're calibrated. You can go back to getting it in the center of the face. There could be something from a mechanic standpoint that's making you have a tendency to hit it more off the toe. Even if that's the case, if you're doing what you're saying, will help. The main thing that I see that leads to toe strikes from a mechanical perspective would be coming down steep and over the top. So if I come down steep and over the top, the sweet spot of the club is going to be working toward me, right? It's going to be working in this direction as it's coming through contact. So when the sweet spot works toward me, I'm going to tend to hit it more off the toe. When the sweet spot works more away from me too much, I'm going to tend to hit it off the heel. So my guess is you're probably coming down a little bit steep, right? The club's working to the left by the time it's getting to the golf ball, which is making you tend to hit it more on the toe. If that's the case, I'd work on shallowing out the club. Outside of that, it's hard for me to know from a mechanic perspective what's going on. But if you look on video and you're coming down steep, the club's working to the left, then I would recommend working through our 20-minute shallowing fix. To get to the 20-minute shallowing fix, click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute shallowing fix. So Chris J says, I'm having trouble understanding how to push with the lead leg without really extending or making my shoulders rotate to the left, resulting in a pull. What? I'm having problems understanding how to push with the lead leg without really extending or making my shoulders rotate to the left, resulting in a pull slice. So I'm not sure on the second part of that, but as far as the lead leg, so we want to flex in that lead leg, right? So when we start the downswing, we want to flex with that lead leg. We also want to flex with the trail leg, and we want to flex with the hips. That's what's going to initiate the rotation in the start of the downswing. So I'm here, and then I'm going to push. I'm going to push basically my knees out over my toes. So my lead leg is going to flex and then bow out a little bit, and then from there, right, I'm going to be in this area by that time, and then from there, I'm going to extend up and through from there. So what early extension is when the hips extend early. It's typically happening from the very start of the downswing. So right, we'll be here, and then we get there, right? So what I need to do is I need to actually flex the hips, flex the knees to start the downswing, and then from there, I'm going to push up and out of it and extend the hips through the ball. Right? So that's what that is. As far as lead leg without really extending or making my shoulders rotate to the left in a pull. Right. So like I said earlier, what we have to do is we have to shallow out the club with the upper body. We rotate with the lower body. So you have to, odds are, if you're someone who's coming down steep and you're also early extending, if you're doing both, then you're doing stuff with your arms that's also making you come down steep. So you need to introduce either more flexion extension in the wrist. You need to introduce more rotation in the forearms. You introduce more, external rotation with the trail shoulder, internal with the lead shoulder, or right side bend. Those are the things that shallow out the club, right? So if I do all those things, I'm going to do that. I'm going to rotate my forearms. Then I'm going to get my elbows, right? And then I'm going to go into right side bend. You look at that. Look at how much I can shallow out the club, right? So you need to do some of those things or all those things to get the club shallowing out, right? So that would look something like this. If you're someone who's going like this, right? So I'm actually shallowing out the club with my lower body, or doing a shallowing move with the lower body, but I'm also steepening with the upper body, right? We need to shallow with the upper body and use the lower body to rotate. All right, let's keep the questions coming. We got about 15 minutes left. For shots 100 yards or less. For what? For 100 yards or less? I'm guessing it cut off before you had your actual question. How does the swing change for 100 shots or less? It really doesn't change very much. It's just shorter. It's really it. You're just taking the same thing and just doing it in a shorter swing. When you do a longer swing, there's more lifting of the arms, right? So the club's going to get more elevated up here, but for now and for depending on what you're hitting, you may still be doing that for a 100-yard shot. But if it's if it's not a full swing, right, then you're really just kind of doing the same thing. It's just that you're already getting that club in a position to be able to work down in a good spot, right? So if I'm taking a full swing, I can get the club kind of in this area, right? Because I have time to work it into a good position. But if I'm taking a shorter swing, I wouldn't want the club to be right here. I mean, you could, but it's just going to be harder to work it into a good position. I'm going to tend to have the club kind of already in that position to come down. So it's usually not something you really have to think about, but that's kind of how it's different. It's really the same swing. It's just shorter. You're just not turning as much. You're not lifting as much. So it's not, it's really not much different. There's typically not going to be, because of that, there's not going to be as much separation. Everything's kind of coming through together, meaning, I'm not getting as big a separation between my hip and my shoulders, right? Because I'm just not creating that in a shorter swing. Typically, if we're a lot shorter, like 30 yards and less, typically everything's kind of moving through together. I'm not going to be, my hips and my shoulders are going to be turning a similar amount, right? So if I'm hitting a 30-yard shot, right, my hips here might be turned about 25 degrees and so are my shoulders, right? Whereas for a longer shot, my hips are going to be 90 degrees and my hips might be 45 degrees, right? Something like that. So there's more separation there, but it's really, you're just taking the same thing. You're just making it shorter. That's it. So Reg N says, does the same shallowing swing work with a sandwich? Yes. So what is shallowing out the club? Shallowing out the club is just getting the club underneath the line, basically getting it behind your hands, right? That's what shallowing out the club is. Now, if you're trying to hit like a cut spin kind of shot, you may not shallow out the club. You may actually kind of come down steep and cut across it, right? But if you're just hitting kind of like a normal standard kind of shot, you're going to be shallowing out the club. Ideally, you would be. So Bob B says, is there a reason that I would not want to pivot on my front ball of my foot rather than the heel? Is there a reason that I would not want to pivot on my front ball of my foot rather than the heel? I feel like I can pivot easier. Saw your video on getting a longer backswing from more distance, and you suggested lifting your front foot heel on the backswing to get more rotation. Well, it's harder to, basically if you're pushing into the ground, right, it's easier to straighten out your leg. If I'm like this, it's harder to get my hip to turn back more, as opposed to if I'm like that, I can get my hip to turn back more. So anatomically, you wouldn't really want to be like this when you go up to the top, because it's going to be harder to get the hip to turn around. I want to be able to push into the ground and push my hip back around. Typically, that's going to be done in the heel. So John K says, any suggestions for a pitch shot at the front lip of a green side bunker to get over the bunker, but not over the green. Yeah, high lofted club, open the face a little bit, make good contact. If I knew the reasons why you're struggling with that shot, it may help. What's exactly happening when you try to do that? What are you trying to do? But I would recommend using a high lofted club, opening the face a little bit. Depending on your skill level, you can maybe open up the face a lot more and hit kind of a full on flop shot. But most people that's kind of a high degree of difficulty shot. If it's not something you've done a lot, then something that you've practiced a lot may be kind of difficult to just pull out on the course first thing. But high lofted club, open the face, and really focus on making good contact with the ball, because that will help hoist the ball up in the air. And depending on your skill level, I would kind of aim at the middle of the green to get on the middle of the green. I feel like a lot of people they try to hit these shots like landed in the perfect spot, and they just don't give themselves a lot of margin for error. And they end up leaving it in the bunker. So until you kind of gain that, that skill, I would recommend kind of aiming for that part of the green. Bobby says, sorry about the explanation. I meant lifting the lead heel, not the back. I guess I'm confused because you're talking about turning in the backswing and then pivoting. I'm not sure what you want to put the heel back on the ground. So I'm saying lift the heel off the ground to free up your pivot, right? But then we're going to put the heel back on the ground and then rotate through. Now, typically, same thing in the downswing. If you're talking about staying in the balls of your foot, typically, if you do that, it's harder to rotate the body because it's harder to. If I'm like this, it's hard to straighten out my leg. If I'm up on the balls of my feet and my heel's not on the ground, right? It's harder to straighten out my leg when I do that. If my heel's in the ground, now I can more powerfully straighten out my leg. But hey, if you can drive in the balls of your lead foot and straighten out your leg and get everything to rotate, then great. But for most people, including myself, that's a difficult thing to do. Nazrilla, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, says, I have a hard time getting to a good position at the top of my backswing. What is your first move on the backswing? And at what point do you start to hinge your wrists? As far as first move to start the backswing is a pressure shift. So just kind of shifting the pressure into my trail foot. That's kind of my first move. So I'm here, shift pressure into the trail foot, start my backswing. As far as when the hands start to hinge up, it's pretty gradual. It's pretty minimal in the beginning, right? But there is some hinge to this point. So here I'm going to have a little bit of hinge. It's not exactly like that would be like no hinge, right? So typically about a little bit below waist level is when I'm going to have the club parallel to the ground. And then from there, it's going to be a kind of a gradual, a continued gradual amount, but it's going to be a little bit accelerated at that point. So it's pretty minimal to here. And then from there, it's a little bit more gradual to the top. So I guess to answer your question, it's starting to hinge right at the beginning of the swing, but it's very minimal in the very beginning. And then it starts to gain more as you get up to the top. If you're struggling with getting into a good position at the top, I would look for what's breaking down in the swing that's causing that. And I'd be interested to know why you think you're in a bad position at the top. Because typically what we're doing at the top of the swing, the reason why I asked this is I had a student tell me that they were going across the line. And they've been trying to stop going across the line. Well, going across the line isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's lots of players that go across the line. Sometimes it's actually a good thing depending on what's going on in your swing. So if you have a longer swing, generally it's better to be across the line because if you have a long swing and you're laid off, then you're going to apply pressure in this club that's going to make you come down steep. Now, if you have a short swing in your cross, then you don't really have any time because you're not applying pressure for a long enough time. So I'd be interested to know why you think you're in a bad position, because odds are you're probably in a position that allows you to work the club down correctly. I don't know what your handicap level is, um, but I'd be cautious of just trying to chase a position at the top because you feel like that's the position you need to be in. If you're hitting functional shots, odds are you're probably in a good position at the top. You're in a necessary position to get you to come down to the ball. And if you want that change, then you need to figure out what's the actual issue that's going on there. So Chris J says, what is the best takeaway drill to stop hands from going out on takeaway? It's actually a stick drill. So it's just kind of a variation of a stick drill. That's kind of exaggerates it, but I think this is a really good one to do. So basically you do the stick drill, alignment stick going down the shaft, but you set up with the stick on your trail side, right? And basically if I do that, I can't, it's if I push my hands out away from me, I have to have the club going so far out. It's not going to work. So this really helps you to get the hands kind of going more in a better position. Another good one is basically do the same stick drill, but have it on this side, but keep the stick on your body, right? So if you look here, I'm going to have it here, but I still want it touching my hip, right? So if I move my hands out of the way, the stick moves away from my body. If I bring it back here, now the stick's still touching my body at club parallel. So those are two good ones to help you get the club going back in a better position. But I'd only change it if it's something that needs to, if it leads to, because that's what we have to. I feel like this is another kind of, I don't know, pet peeve is the right word, but something that I see a lot of people do that is not beneficial for them. A lot of golfers is that they worry about their takeaway so much. So what we have to understand is that a good setup sets up a good backswing. A good backswing sets up a good transition. A good transition sets up a good downswing. A good downswing sets up a good impact. So it all has to build on. So you have to look at where the breakdown is. And I only really like to change a golfer's takeaway or backswing if it's directly benefiting the things that need to happen. Impact's the most important thing, right? So we have to have, if there's a takeaway issue that's making the impact poor, because typically if we have a bad takeaway, that's going to lead to a bad transition, right? Or, and then the bad transition leads to a bad downswing. Bad downswing is a bad impact. So if the takeaway is kind of the root cause of that, heck yeah, let's get that takeaway in a better position. But with most golfers I see, the takeaway is usually fine. That's not where things are breaking down. It's usually something going on in the transition, in the start of the downswing, that sort of thing. That's usually when things start breaking down. So I'd be hesitant to just kind of start messing with the takeaway unless you know that it's causing the issue. Because what you don't want to do is work really hard on getting your takeaway to work better, and then it doesn't actually do anything to make you play better, right? Which is something I see a lot of golfers do. So not necessarily a pet peeve. It's just something I feel bad for people that work on something that's not actually going to help them, just because, I think a lot of people kind of gravitate toward the takeaway, working on the takeaway, because it seems like it's an easy thing to fix. And it is a fairly easy thing to fix compared to other things. But a lot of times it really doesn't do anything for you. In fact, a lot of times it makes things worse, which is also stinks. So, but anyway, thanks everybody for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow. A little different schedule this week because we have a clinic this week, tomorrow and Wednesday. So we'll be doing tomorrow and Wednesday will be 3 p.m. Eastern time. So I'll be here tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Right. Thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to y'all next time.